All right, here we go. Y'all get your coffee cup up. I want to give a shout out to all of our first responders. And I want to say thank you for what you do to our school teachers, to our police officers, and to our military personnel all around the world. And I would also now like to include those that are watching us from different states and different places in the world. We got a lady on here from the Philippines right now, watching from the Philippines. And I had someone message me yesterday from Chile in South America. Dear God in heaven, He has been good to us. Thank y'all. Please continue to share the morning word. We are going to be looking at getting on transitioning this into a podcast. Some people are not on Facebook, and so it will be on YouTube, and it will be on a podcast that we will put together later. We'll tell you how to get a hold of that once we get it fixed. I'm sorry to all you international and other state people that are watching us. I'm from Alabama. I'm as southern as a buttered biscuit, and my language and my mannerisms, my accent, all of that is southern, but that's just the way God made me. So I hope you can understand it wherever you are. Our morning word this morning is choices, character, and consequences. Choices, character, and consequences. In the 13th chapter of Genesis, let me set the stage. Abraham, or his name is still Abram has been called by God to leave Haran, take his family with him, and to go to the promised land. He took Lot, his nephew, and they went to the promised land. They got to Canaan. There was a famine there. They went down to Egypt. God, once the famine lifted, they moved back into Canaan. That's where we are right now in the 13th chapter. They've come out of Egypt back into the promised land. And now we're going to see some things that happen. Abram and Lot are very blessed. They have enormous resources, cattle, oxen, laborers, helpers, very rich in livestock. It says very rich in silver and in gold. And they're traveling now up through the promised land that God's given them. Now, it's theirs by promise, but it's not theirs by possession. They are still traveling in it. They're nomadic herdsmen, and there has been no war to secure the land. They're just walking through God's promises. God, there's so much there that we could get. But here's the verses that I want you to look at this morning. Verse 8, chapter 13. So Abram said to Lot, and it's because their wealth is so great that the land can't hold them, together. So here we go. So Abram said to Lot, please let there be no strife between you and me, and between my herdsmen and your herdsmen, for we are brethren. Is not the whole land before you? Please separate from me. If you take the left, then I will go to the right. If you go to the right, then I will go to the left. And Lot lifted his eyes and saw the plain of Jordan, that it was well watered everywhere, before the Lord destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah. Like the garden of the Lord, like the land of Egypt, as you go down to Zoar. Then Lot chose for himself all the plain of Jordan, and Lot journeyed east, and they separated from each other. Abram dwelt in the land of Canaan, and Lot dwelt in the cities of the plain, and pitched his tent even as far as Sodom. But the men of Sodom were exceedingly wicked and sinful against the Lord. When I was a young boy, we used to get the catalogs that came in the mail, the Christmas catalogs, and they would start coming this time of year. And I would get those Christmas catalogs, and I would sit down, and I would go page by page, and I would circle and underline the things that I liked, and I would dog-ear the pages. I would dog-ear the pages, and I would leave it laying so my mom and dad could see it. In other words, I was kind of telling them, what I was looking at and what I wanted. Now, I imagine myself playing with and owning every toy and item in those, the cowboy boots, the cowboy hat, the cowboy holster, the gun, the wagon, the bicycle, the G.I. Joe. I had it circled, I had it dog-eared, all of that. I could see myself with that stuff. I would play with it in my mind. So I would dog-ear the page and leave it sitting there. Now, nothing's changed. I'm 60 years old, and all I've done is swapped magazines. I've swapped Sears and Roebuck for Cabela's, and I've swapped J.C. Penney for L.L. Bean. but there's still something on almost every page that I would love to have. You know, my wants and my desires are overwhelming, especially when I put my eyes on it and I can see it, and then I begin to possess it in my mind. Well, that's what happened with Lot, and that's what happened with Abram. They were together. They were very numerous. They were very prosperous. And they began to squabble. The herdsmen began to squabble. And so they needed to be together in this land of foreigners. But instead, they let their wealth cause a discord. And guys, listen, I'm going to tell you straight up, and that this is not a teaching on that, but we need to be careful what we ask for. Materialism and money and possessions can cause a lot of problems. They can cause a lot of problems, especially within our family and amongst very close friends. But anyway, Abram stepped up to the plate and he took the initiative. He shows character, and here's his character. He says, "Let there be no strife between you and me." Let there be no strife between you and... Now listen, God had chosen Abram to give him and his descendants the promised land. The promise was made to Abram and his family. But here's now Abram, who's coming to this young buck, this young whippersnapper, his nephew Lot, and he's saying, listen, we're family, and I don't want to have strife and turmoil. Here's what I'm going to do. God's given me this land. God's given me this land and my family, but here's what we're going to do. I'm going to let you choose first where you want to live. See, if you choose first and I choose second, then you can't fuss about where I live. And Abram chose peace. He chose peace in the family over the prosperity of his family. And he simply surrendered his promises that God made him back to God. He said, God, you're in charge of this. And I'm pursuing the path of righteousness. I'm pursuing peace as much as is possible. The scripture says, let us live at peace with all men. So I'm going to let Lot choose. Now here we see Lot's character. Okay, so Abram says, for the sake of family peace, I'm going to let you little young whippersnapper, I'm going to let you have the first choice on where we are going to live. If you go to the left, I'll go to the right. If you go to the right, I'll go to the left. So here's what Lot did. Lot didn't say, well, Uncle Abram, where would you like to live? He didn't do that. It said he turned around and he began to look. And it said his eyes were cast towards the plain of Jordan. He looked around and he saw the land that had the most water and the best grass because he had a very large herd. And it says, and he chose for himself. You need to circle that. He chose for himself. All Lot was thinking about was himself. And that therein his character is revealed. He made a choice based on his character, and his character was self-centered. It was all about Lot. It was all about his stuff. It was all about... So he said, I want to live over here. Now, notice it says that he pitched his tent in the plain of Jordan, even as far as Sodom. You know what happened? It tells us right here in verse 13 that Sodom was exceedingly wicked. You know what happened? He was a nomadic herdsman who, at the end of the story, finds himself in the city of Sodom. He swapped all of his stuff for agricultural living for city. He's living in the city, and God had to call him out of Sodom before he kills it. Y'all know the end of the story. Before he destroys it. So you don't have cows and oxen inside the city. He swapped all that. He bought him a condo and got him a highfalutin swivel chair job somewhere. And he started making it big. And the Bible tells us in the New Testament that Lot was righteous, but he oppressed his soul, meaning that he was going against his conscience and what he knew to be right by living in Sodom. But he wanted it so bad. He was like me with those catalogs that dog-eared the pictures. Man, what do you want for Christmas? Well, you just pick a page that's bent down, baby. I want something on it. And his wants and his self-centeredness and his greed and his pride and his ego caused him to make choices to serve himself. And Sodom, which is a picture of this world, Sodom and its wickedness and its evilness sucked him up like a vacuum. it just sucked him up like a vacuum. Now, he survived it, but you know what happened? There's consequences to our choices. He served himself. He took first choice. He never considered his uncle Abram. He never consulted God. He said, man, I've made it big. So he loaded up the truck and he moved to Beverly like the Beverly Hillbillies. He said, I've hit it big now. So he swapped in his sheep for a swivel chair, swapped in his oxen for an office, and he made it big, and he sat in the gates of Sodom. You know what happened? When God got ready to judge Sodom for its wickedness, he told Abraham, I won't destroy it before I get your nephew Lot out. But you know who came out of it? Lot and his underage girls, 2 of them, because they were sanctified by Lot's faith. That's a different teaching for a different day. And everybody else in his family, his grown children, his grown son-in-laws and daughter-in-laws, and even his wife were lost in Sodom. You know why? Because they gave no credence to Lot's warning that they must get out of Sodom before God destroyed it. They gave no credence to that because Lot, he did not know it, but when he chose Sodom and he chose the plain for himself, to serve himself, and he thought serve his family, you know what he did? He surrendered his testimony. He surrendered his integrity. He surrendered his testimony for God. So when he turns around and tries to make a plea for on God's behalf for his family to get out, they didn't take him seriously. They said, really? You bought all this, we have all this, and now you're telling us we got to get out and leave it because God is going to burn Sodom? Dad, you're crazy. Dad, wake up. You've been watching too many Benny Hinn movies. Come on, get out of it. You're losing your mind. Come on. And you know what? They died. And so here's what we need to know, that our character, if we don't develop our character, our choices are going to follow that. Okay, listen to me, guys. When we fail to follow our character, remember yesterday we talked about the blessed life and all of that was about developing character. When we fail to develop our character, when we fail to consider God first and consider others second, and we always put ourselves instead of third place into first place, our character is going to lead us to make choices. And our character is going to be determined by our eyes and our ears and what it can do for me. And here's what the whole thing's about this morning. And those choices have consequences, long-term consequences that you and I cannot see and cannot fathom. And our choices are going to have consequences for our children and our children's children. And Lot turned up that he got delivered in his 2 young girls, but you know what? Even his young girls had been influenced by the ways of Sodom. They said, man, we're out here and we got there ain't at the use of days, ain't no boys where we are. So they seduced their daddy, got him drunk and slept with him and got pregnant from their own father, an incestuous relationship, both of the girls in a conspiracy. And they had children that became the Moabites, which became one of the most fiercest enemies of Israel. That's Abraham's people. One of the most fierce enemies of Israel all through the rest of the Old Testament. Now, guys, choices have consequences, but character will determine our choices. Character. You got to put God first and other people second. And that's part of having a godly character. Humility, integrity, grace, mercy. Abram said, Lot, you choose first, and I'll take what's left. And it turns out that Abraham was the most blessed. You got to trust God. It looks crooked. It looks upside down. It's a kingdom wherein the last shall be first and the first shall be last. And to grow up is to become like a child. That's the kingdom of God. Character, choices, and consequences. You can't separate them. Character, choices, and consequences. You can't separate them. One leads to the other. If you don't have godly character, you're going to end up making ungodly choices, and those are going to have horrendous consequences long term, and we can't even see it. Our country's living in the middle of that right now. Hey, listen, guys, we were hoping last night that the election would be all over by the evening, and of quite possibly could have if they'd have called some of these states. But it ain't over till the big gal sings, and so don't put the chairs on the church bus yet. Let's see how it pans out today. God's still large and in charge, and we'll see. We'll see if God can get our president back into office for another 4 years. Thank you all for participating with us in the fast, those of you that did. Thank you for your contributions to the ministries that we've been raising up. We don't have anyone picked out for November yet. We may give you the month of November off. It's Thanksgiving, so just be thankful and bless God for blessing us. We hope you have a good day. I will see y'all tomorrow. Good Lord willing, and the saints don't rise. Peace out.